So again, just as a reminder, there's 365 of these. We're on number 46, which is awesome. And the course doesn't dictate how you do the course. It says right in the beginning of the manuscript just that everyone should do it. Everyone should do it. And so there's no saying how. It's just that we're glad that you're here today at this conversation for lesson 46. Now, just a reminder of some of the recent lessons we looked at. I just see I missed the way I laid this out, but number 43, which was last week, was God is my source and I cannot see apart from him. Lesson 44, God is the light in which I see. And then yesterday, lesson 45, we looked at it was God is the mind with which I think. Which with I think, easy for me to say. It wasn't easy yesterday either. God is the mind with which I think. And so yesterday, what we talked about in this lesson, a couple of key takeaways. Number one is that the key to what our real thoughts are this idea that God is the mind, that we are one. It's a shared mind, and so that's where our thoughts come from. They're not separate from God. And it's also a distinction because when we are in a shared mind, there is a clarity about what is real and what you think is real. Because remember, we've talked a lot about our perception is typically our ego coming out and overplaying what really is. And so true vision is not what we think we see. That's ego creating images for us. True vision is with the shared mind of God. And then we also talked about yesterday that you think with the mind of God, so that when we are in that connectedness, that's where your thinking is coming from. And when you are there, then you can't let your egoic mind give you thoughts that aren't real. So the whole idea is to get to that spot of clearing with that, so that it is that connection with the shared mind. And then the final thought was this one, is that real thoughts are shared with the mind of God. There is no separation when we're in real thoughts and we're connected from that respect. Now, today's lesson is just a continuation, and I love this one, and that is that God is the love in which I forgive, And so I thought I would again, I'm going to read a little bit of the text from the lesson. I'll go to the explanation, and we'll come back and lay out the lesson. The format for the lessons are going to be similar now for the next few lessons, I believe. Here's what it says, though. God is the love in which I forgive. God does not forgive because God has never condemned. That's the first statement that it makes, is God does not forgive because he does not and has never condemned. And there must be condemnation before forgiveness is necessary. So that's why there's no such thing as forgiveness from God, because there's no condemnation from him. Forgiveness is the great need of this world of perception. But this is because this world of perception is a world of illusions. Those who forgive are thus releasing themselves from illusions, while those who withhold forgiveness are binding themselves in illusions. As you condemn only yourself, so do you forgive only yourself. See, again, forgiveness only comes when there's condemnation. So if you've condemned yourself, then you are the only one that can forgive. And God does not condemn, so there's no forgiveness from him. Yet, although God does not forgive, God's love is nevertheless the basis of forgiveness. Fear condemns and love forgives. I love that statement. Fear condemns and love forgives. Forgiveness thus undoes what fear has produced, returning the mind to the awareness of God. For this reason, forgiveness can truly be called salvation. Forgiveness is the means by which illusions disappear. So the explanation for it says this, lesson 36 is God is the love in which I forgive. This lesson is interesting in that the focus is on the giver, not the receiver of forgiveness. That's a really key distinction, I believe. The first thing to realize is that although we perceive ourselves to be sinners that have offended God, God does not have to forgive us for our supposed sins. See, the reason for that is simple. God does not forgive sins because God has never condemned. Only those who have condemned perceive something to forgive. So since the realm of God is knowledge, which is based on truth, God knows that within a oneness of all there could never be something outside the one self to condemn. God knows that creation is the extension of oneself. Everything remains as God created it, perfect, whole, and complete. God is cause and God's creation is its effect. Together, two sides of one indivisible mind. Now, although God knows his Son to be part of God's mind, those who believe in separation have forgotten the truth of their divine birthright. They perceive themselves as limited, separate, vulnerable beings that could attack and be attacked. They perceive themselves to be sinners that have been harmed and have harmed others as well as God. So or let me say it this way, how could God, being first cause, be harmed by one of his own effects? Let me say that again. How could God, being first cause, be harmed by one of his own effects? Because remember earlier we said this, he is cause and effect. So how could he do that? To sin or to harm the invulnerable is impossible in truth, and that's truth with a capital T. We talked about that yesterday. Sin only appears to exist within the delusional mind that perceives separation and believes their mind's imagings are real. So forgiveness is needed in this world because our erroneous beliefs have made a false world with victims and victimizers. That's our false world based on perception, which is separate from the mind of God. Perceiving ourselves to be limited, a limited ego body, we also believe that we can attack and be attacked by others. This belief in the vulnerability of the Son of God is what made the need for that correction or forgiveness. We need to be willing to forgive ourselves from our own mind's delusional belief system, and that's the beginning of all of this. Now, although this exercise starts by asking you to forgive others, which I'll get to in a moment, ultimately it's only you who needs your own forgiveness. By forgiving, you free your mind from its egoic belief that there are outside forces that can harm you. Since your mind is the source of all your perceptions, you only condemn or forgive yourself. A thought system based on limitation and fear can only condemn. Only a thought system based on love and truth can forgive. So forgiveness dissolves the illusion of provisional reality and returns your split mind to the awareness of God. Forgiveness is salvation, since it is in the means that leads to the reawakening of the split-minded to the truth that they are alone, are the maker of the provisional reality that they perceive. Although God does not forgive, God's love is nevertheless the basis of true forgiveness. I love that statement. Again, remember that God does not forgive because he doesn't condemn, and only in condemnation can there be forgiveness. So he doesn't forgive. However, his love is the basis for true forgiveness. It's God's love that keeps us safe from our own denial of our divine inheritance. This truth that you share the one mind of God cannot be lost, only temporarily forgotten. Your ego's belief in the fantasies cannot change your holiness. Holiness, remember, perfect, whole, and complete. God's love protects you from your ego's fantasies becoming real. You remain as God created you, perfect, whole, and complete. God's sleeping Son needs only to forgive his belief in lack, limitation, and separation. That means you, from your egoic mind, needs only to forgive yourself your belief in lack, limitation, and separation. The last paragraph says this: forgiveness is the dropping of your fear-based thought system. Forgiveness is the dropping of your fear-based thought system, or letting go of your fear-based thought system. And accepting the thought system of the voice of God. So the Holy Spirit is God's loving gift to you. That's that voice. It protects all who perceive themselves to be weak, lonely, or separate from those dreams becoming true. The Holy Spirit's presence within your split mind guarantees your reawakening from your perceived nightmare and your return to the truth that is perfect safety. So God is a love in which I forgive. There's a book, in fact, it was in the very front of the book Shift, Gary Keller quotes, it's weird to bring these two together, and yet it's not, right? In this, he quotes from Andy Andrews, who wrote a book called The Traveler's Gift. And The Traveler's Gift is a really cool read. Andy has got a really fun story, too. He spoke for us at Keller Williams a number of years ago, and he has a fascinating life story. But In this, he talks about the book, The Traveler's Gift, right at the very beginning. One of the takeaways from that story of The Traveler's Gift is I'll have a forgiving heart. And I read that book probably in 2005, I think, for the first time, and that sticks with me still to this day. One of the things Andy shared when he spoke to us is that forgiveness is only impacting the one who feels like they have to forgive. Does that make sense? I mean, because too often we'll do, our egoic mind will say something like, "Well, if they come and ask for forgiveness, I might grant that on them." And here's what he said. He said something to the fact that the person who you owe forgiveness to doesn't suffer because you're holding that. The only person who suffers because you're holding that is you. So if you can just give forgiveness, then you clear that, and then you get to be better in your day to day. And I think that's part of where this lesson is going to take us. So the exercise itself says this: today's exercise requires at least 3 5-minute practice periods. So that's similar to the last couple of days, and as many shorter ones as possible. Begin the longer practice periods by repeating today's idea that God is the love in which I forgive. Say it to yourself, and then as usual, close your eyes and start to go inside. So it's outside first. God is love in which I forgive, and then I'm going to close my eyes. And as I do so, I'm going to spend a minute or two searching your mind for those whom you have not forgiven. So this is the lesson in just giving forgiveness, getting it out there. Now, it doesn't matter how much you have to have not forgiven them, right? There's no degrees of forgiveness. It's forgiveness or no forgiveness. That's the difference. So you have forgiven them entirely or not at all. There's nothing in between. So if you're doing the exercises well, the ones we've been building up to here, you should have no difficulty in finding a number of people you have not forgiven. It's a safe rule that anyone you do not like is a suitable subject. Mention each of them by name as you say it this way: God is the love in which I forgive you, and their name. So that's the first part of this lesson, is that just go into, get the longer sessions are 3 to 5 minutes where you say, God is the love in which I forgive. Close your eyes, say it again, and then search your mind for those that you do choose to forgive. And there's no degree of forgiveness that's either forgive or no forgiveness. So the purpose of the first phase of this section, is to put you in a position to ultimately then forgive yourself. See, after you've applied the idea to all those that come to mind, so then that's at 3 to 5 minutes, all those that come to mind, at the end of that, here's what you say: God is the love in which I forgive myself. God is the love in which I forgive myself. God is the love in which I forgive myself. So let's see. Then you want to devote the remainder of the 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, adding the following ideas. So that this is where you can kind of build off of that. So I'm going to give you just a couple thoughts on it. Ideas like this: God is the love for which I love myself. So that might be that, with your eyes closed, part of what you do in that exercise. Or then devote the remainder of the practice period to other ideas like this one: God is the love in which I am blessed. The form of the application may vary considerably. I mean, you can say God is the love, and whatever you want to put after that is up to you. There's no right or wrong with this. So, for example, central to it is that God is the love in which I forgive, and yet you might say something like this: I cannot be guilty because I am a child of God. Remember, we talked about if guilt is hell, what is the opposite? This was about a week ago. And the opposite, it doesn't exist. So guilt is only something we've created in our egoic mind. So, I cannot be guilty because I'm a child of God. I've already been forgiven. That might be what you choose to say, because God cannot condemn forgive because he doesn't condemn. Or no fear is possible to a mind beloved by God. So again, that whole idea that we're quieting the egoic mind, which is the cause of separation, the feeling of scarcity, lack, and fear. And then the other one might be this one: there is no need to attack because love has forgiven me. We talked about that a long time ago. That remember the attack thing, the way the egoic mind feels like if I'm going to be attacked, I better attack first. And so that's how that mind works, and that's what causes so much unrest in the world, we believe. So that's the list. Let me just finish the last couple of thoughts, and then I'll just open up if you have any questions or comments. So the practice period should end, however, always by repeating today's lesson. So whatever that time frame is, and you walk through those steps, always end by saying today's idea that God is the love in which I forgive. So you come back to that statement, and then that practice period is over. Now, we talked about shorter periods. They may consist either of a repetition of the idea for today, that God is the love in which I forgive, in its original or in related forms, whichever you prefer. So however you might choose to alter it, that works for you. Be sure, however, to make more specific applications if they are needed. Now, what do we mean by that? More specific applications will be needed at any time during the day when you become aware of any kind of negative reaction you might have to anyone, present or not. In that event, tell him silently, God is the love in which I forgive you. Him or her, I mean, whoever that would be. God is the love in which I forgive you. That's silently what you would say if you come across someone that triggers for you. So that's the lesson today. God is the love in which I forgive. I always think about Andy Andrews. I will have a forgiving heart. The only person who suffers when there isn't forgiveness given is the person who's holding that forgiveness has to be given. And that's such to me, that's such a clear picture in my head. So with that, is there any thoughts, questions, or comments?
This just gets interesting because I keep getting tied up in the new definitions that this course is introducing, and they so often conflict with definitions that I already hold firmly in my head. So I just have to keep kind of playing with it and practicing the distinction and just be at peace with it.
And there's no right or wrong. I think the one thing that I always think about as I go through the Course in Miracles is that if so much of the unrest and suffering and the stuff we do to ourselves comes from our egoic mind. And so the more I can separate from that, the more there's an opportunity to just truly be at peace in who we are. Mm-hmm. And yet, if you think about it, we've all been, most of us have been conditioned just the opposite, right? Especially we talk about forgiveness and sin and all of that. So it's a challenge. But I love that you're staying in the game though, Lori, because that's really where I think the answers will lie for you, whatever those will be. So that's awesome. Thank you.
And for some areas where I, had it ingrained practically since birth that there is a right and wrong, I just let it go to my maker that at some point he'll tell me the rest.
There you go.
And I just keep exploring in earnest.
Yeah. See, and in that though, that gives you access potentially where so many won't. Right?
Yes.
I always think it's in the inquisitiveness, it's in the exploration where I think you'll find really what is right for you, and mm-hmm. that's for all of us. So yeah, I think about it this way. If given a choice to live life joyful, at peace, content, or living life anxious, fear-based, worried about others, which one would we all choose? I think we'd all choose the former. Well, we all have that choice. It's just a matter of some reprogramming in many cases that we just have to work on. And in doing so, there can be that. So that's where I love that you're in this conversation with us.
And we talk about ourselves as children of God, and parents want their kids to be happy.
Yeah.
Happy and healthy and enjoying life in the moment.
Yeah, I think that would be a fair statement for all parents, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So anything else? Thanks, Lori.
Thank you.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining me. I know we're going to start these at 8 o'clock now from here on out. So whether you can jump in or not, that's awesome if you can. If not, we will be updating. We'll pivot 2020, the website under A Course in Miracles. So we'll have those there for you. Join us for 10 o'clock if you're not registered for Mega Camp. If you are, have a great day at Mega Camp today. We start with the huddle at 9:30 with your respective groups. So there's still time to get there. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining us.